Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy, I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. And oh boy, so much stress these days. Naomi and I are moving apartments, and there's all this chaos between the WGA and the ATA, the agents and the writers. And I'm stuck in the middle of it. So that's where I am. You want to hear inside information about the lawsuit that the WGA just leveled? What's the verb? What do you do with a lawsuit? You level a lawsuit? You drop a lawsuit? Yo, my new lawsuit is dropping this Tuesday. You better check it out. I remember when young lawyers on the corners of New York would often try to sell you lawsuits out of their backpacks. Anyway, you don't want to hear about the minutia of the infighting going on over packaging fees and fiduciary conflicts. Hey, this is a very good episode today. This is Anna Connolly. I was sent Anna's, new album, first album, by her publicist, and I thought it was so good, and she was going to be here in Los Angeles for a couple days to play some shows, so I'm like, oh boy, let's talk. And if you don't know who Anna is, let me read you her bio. Originally from Los Angeles, musician Anna Connolly grew up going to punk shows as a young teenager, and when her family moved to D.C. in the 1980s, she and her sister Cynthia became part of a small, nascent punk scene, which later became what everyone knows as D.C. punk rock. Anna spent many of her high school years working at a record store, buying records and going to shows. Though many of her friends were in bands, Minor Threat practiced in the basement of her mom's house, she didn't feel a compulsion to play until much later in life, after she had had kids and got divorced. Her first album, Afterthoughts, is out now. That's the album I was alluding to before. And Anna and I, even though we're slightly different generations, I think she is Gen X, and I am a Zennial, as they say. Oh boy. When I said that out loud, I just wanted to stick my head in a vise and just turn the little crank until it smashes my skull. Point being, we're two different generations, but we grew up the same and had very similar emotional journeys. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about what it was like, when I was in high school and I listened to a ton of Minor Threat and a lot of stuff on Discord, Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Flipper. I was a huge Nirvana fan, and so I started investigating all the bands that Kurt Cobain had listened to. And that brought me to a lot of the early 80s hardcore. Dead Kennedys, that's in there too. Angry Samoans. But I've only really ever had access to what that scene was like through reading like Henry Rollins' Get in the Van, and that might pretty much be it. So it was really interesting to hear what Anna's childhood was like as a punk in the DC scene, and how that has influenced her in her life, because she is embedded in that scene and still friends with a lot of the people that were part of that, and how have they influenced her, how has Ian MacKaye influenced her. So I thought this was very interesting and very fascinating, and I hope you like it. In fact, I'm also going to play, we talk about one of the songs off of her new album a lot, so I'm going to play that before we get into the interview so you know what we're talking about. By the way, if this is your first time listening to Beginnings, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you'd like to check out other episodes, you can find all of them on Spotify. If you want to download them, they're on beginnings.libsyn.com. You can get them all. You can just grab some at random. I could suggest a couple for you. And as a musician, maybe you'd want to hear some other musicians that have been on the show. Let's see here. Kurt Heasley of the Lilies has been on. That was fun. David Grubbs of Gastro del Sol. Mitski. Rachel Brown of Field Mouse. Those are all fun ones. Who else might you be interested in? Will Cullen Hart from Olivia Tremor Control. Cassie Ramone from the Vivian Girls, Sadie Dupuis of Speedy Ortiz. That was a fun one. Colin Newman from Wire. Him and his wife Malka were on, and that was a really interesting episode. But if you like what you hear and you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Play, and on Stitcher, and on plenty of other places. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Andy Beckerman. And I think that's about it for now. I gotta get back to packing up boxes. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. So again, right before my interview with Anna, I'm gonna play you a song from our album that we talk about a lot. And this is called 21. Enjoy!
Rewind to the time your heart pulled on mine. I'd go to your shows. Some things don't get old. Forward to today. You hear and you stay. Tell me, what would you do? No wish came true, but you said to me, I wish I fucked you when you were 21. I wish I fucked you when you were 21. In a flash, you were back. What have I got to lose? I've got nothing to lose. How could this be wrong? You sing me your songs, and I cling to this thing, a distant dream. But you said to me, I wish I fucked you when you were 21. I wish I fucked you when you were 21. And I miss you. I call your name. Come back. Light me up.
I might not ever have had a physics class. It's possible. When did you have one, in college or in high school?
High school, but my high school physics class was taught by he was a physics teacher, but he was the basketball coach. And I think being a basketball coach was more of his strong suit than being a physics teacher. And so it was it was the basics, but without any kind of, this is harsh maybe, but competence. That's not true. He knew he could do the math. He's not a dummy, but there was no like, here's the wonders of the world. Like, I think physics is infinitely interesting.
I bet it is.
It was just like, like memorize Newton's 3 laws and then spit them back out on the test.
Right. So I went in college, one of my majors was computer programming. And so I have a feeling And then my other major was Russian language and literature.
Right.
And
You
so,
sang a song on your album in Russian.
yes. And so, but I think that what that did was it meant like I never took English lit at all because all my literature was in Russian, like I was studying Russian. And then in science type things, it got covered by computer stuff. So like, that's why I never took physics because I never did.
Okay. So are you good at languages? Because both coding and Russian are different kinds of languages.
Right. I think that I'm good at, I think that I was naturally good at things like languages and math and things like where you know when something is correct or incorrect. And I was less good at things that were vague, in my mind, like philosophy. Mm-hmm. And
which was what I studied.
More interpretive, more theoretical things and more things that are less cut and dry. I always liked things that were where you knew you got the right answer. So like if you're doing coding, like if you get the program right, it works. And so then you did a good job. So there's a lot, even if it might have been hard, it seemed easier to me because it was just seemed straightforward. And like with math, it's like you get the answer right and you can check your work and you know if you're right.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think I spent most of my life, I don't know if that extends out to the rest of your life, but I think I spent most of my life, not just in school, but outside of school, afraid of gray areas, afraid of anything that wasn't a binary or that had a yes or no answer. Because I spent a lot of my youth, like it's almost like a Pavlovian kind of thing, like getting stickers and candy for doing well in school.
Right.
And so when I was in like relationships and things like that, there are no right answers. I was very lost where there wasn't just isn't there just a textbook where I can get the answers for this? Right.
Yeah. I'm totally like that. And I think about a lot recently about just because my music was something I didn't do, until relatively recently. And I still will catch myself saying to people that I'm not a creative person. Like that's what I've always thought all my life. Mm-hmm. Because I never was. Like I never did anything creative. And I think that's when I think about maybe why I never did, I have a feeling it's because of what we're talking about, because it was safer for me to do things that I was good at and that that were more cut and dry, and I knew that I was doing them well or not doing them well. And that was like easier and safer. And I just didn't, and I'm kind of guessing because I don't really remember. I mean, it's not like I made a conscious choice not to do anything creative or like, I wasn't like, I wish I could play music, but I'm afraid to. Like I never thought that before, but I'm just sort of wondering if that's why I never did it, was because it seemed too monumentally like, there's just so much to learn and so many paths you can go down. Like how can you never be correct about like writing a song, and how do you ever know if you're good or not? And, there's too many choices. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No,
or I just wasn't, or I wasn't used to that kind of, I wasn't encouraged that way, or that just wasn't something maybe in our family that was valued or even maybe in my school. I don't know. I just wanted to get good grades, or was told that getting education's important. And so that was just sort of like the thing that I went for. And then since it worked for me, I just kind of did that.
Yeah.
But I didn't try myself, to do anything, to explore any sort of creative side of me at all, until a lot later.
There's a lot in there that I kind of want to unpack, because I've been thinking about, I was reading some material on you before you came over, and I didn't start, I also had the same kind of career path. I was going to be a professor, and I really wanted to do comedy for most of my life, and I just didn't have I had this thing imprinted in my brain by my parents. It's kind of like you, I think. Do well in school and get a good job.
Right.
Be something we can brag about at Temple.
Right.
Was basically the subtext of everything they told me.
Right.
Or that's the way that I interpreted it. Perhaps is maybe I should be taking the blame off my parents, who those are all good things you want for your kid. and say the way that I interpreted everything was like, you better have health insurance. And if you do anything, if you follow a career that doesn't give you health insurance, you are going to, if you get sick, you will impoverish our family. So I didn't move to New York until I was 29 to start doing comedy. Even though I think maybe the difference is, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit, I had always been doing creative stuff in the margins before that.
I see.
I'd been in a band and I had...
Okay.
But nothing on a professional level.
Right. Right. And I remember, I think about this, there was a professor when I was in college, this man from Russia, like I was taking this Russian poetry class in Russian, and it was very small, like not a lot of people were taking that class, like probably 5 people. Mm-hmm. And at the end of it, the man... when, we had to write like a final exam in Russian, like analyze, I don't remember whatever, but he came up to me and he was going on and on about how he was so surprised about how much of he called me how much of a thinker I was, or how much thought or how much I had to say in my exam. Cause I think in class I was really quiet. Mm-hmm. And so he was really like, wow, you feel so much and you interpreted all these things. But I think I don't know. I think I was even in that kind of setting where you're interpreting poems. It wasn't because it was in Russian. I think I was just like also embarrassed or sort of shy to do that, or because that's also kind of vague. Like,
yeah,
what, maybe I'll sound like a fool when I say that this poem is about this, whatever I think it's about. Yeah. And so I definitely didn't have that in me to feel comfortable with those sorts of things for whatever reason. But he was like, he was so happy to read what I wrote and, gave me an A and was all proud of me and stuff. But it was one of the first times where I felt like where I did that and then somebody acknowledged it. And, but yeah, I think about that a lot recently, because in my mind also a long time ago, now again, I do think a lot of it came from my parents and my mom. My parents got divorced when I was pretty young, but I think from both of them, like education's important and you need to get a good job, Yeah. Generally like that in a nutshell. But even, when we moved to DC and I was friends with a lot of people in bands, I didn't want to be in a band, even though I went to shows all the time. It's not like, that was sort of that was my milieu. Like that's who I was hanging around with. That was like my family or my whole scene. But I never thought about doing that. And then I worked in a record store for a little while. And then I realized like that I thought I wanted to do more. Mm-hmm. So I like went to college because I thought that would help me get a better job, but that's kind of why I did that. But I definitely got the idea then. Again, maybe it's my interpretation, or I don't know if it was from the people I was friends with. I've always had this sort of black and white idea that you either are an artist or you're not an art. Like you're either an artist and you're an artist 100%, mm-hmm. and you like don't go to college and you don't have like a normal job or something, or you go to college and you have this other like sort of straight lifestyle. And I think in my mind, it was very much of an either or thing. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go to college. But at that time, I definitely didn't. I wasn't really choosing. I just wanted to go to college. But I think that now that's on my mind a lot about, can you be like a real artist and also have like a demanding professional job, because I think I have some idea in my head that you can't really do that. Like that real artists have to be like 100% artists and have jobs that are just there to support their art. And I don't, so that's another thing that I've just sort of been grappling with on my own, is like, why do I have this idea? And is this actually true? But
I think it comes from, because I think about that a lot too. I think it comes from, I think we get these class ideas in our heads that come from a kind of like bourgeois upper class that says who can afford to just be artists. And especially as like, I remember that there was a big sea change in late 90s, early 2000s when it came to making art. There was like I know in the 90s, I was a teenager in the 90s, and like there was a big emphasis on not selling out. That to have your music in a commercial or something was selling out.
Right.
And then I remember at some point I saw Yola Tango. There was a Yola Tango song in a Volkswagen commercial. And I was like, oh, I guess that's not that bad. If I want to hear them, if they want to continue to make music, that money is probably helping them. I guess Volkswagen, they're not monsters. Like, it's not like it was not like they had music in a Halliburton ad or like an ad for, chains for Guantanamo or something like that. And I think that was the beginning of there being this kind of like class consciousness in music in some way, or in indie arts in general, whereas like, hey, this does not pay a living wage for various reasons. I think that was also around the time that Napster happened to come into existence, and it started to become very difficult to make a living because people could just steal music or TV shows or whatever, what have you. And I think that idea of like the pure artist comes from people who have the luxury of not caring whether they can feed their family or not on their art. Right.
Or, I mean, I guess there are people who like don't have families or who live places that are less expensive. I mean, I think you can, I think you can make that life if you choose not to do certain things,
Yeah.
But,
I think it's also like my fiance and I have made a decision not to have children, and you have children. I think that's definitely you have to put your energy into them. Right. And I think that's probably that's a difficult thing. I mean, we have cats, and that's difficult. Now add two human. How many children do you have?
I have 2 sons. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how much of your energy is, most of it.
I know it's, but I mean, I guess that's true. I'm sure that's true with so many people, and sometimes, there's also that argument that the more you're doing, you find even more space in your brain and in your heart or whatever to get even more stuff done. Like sometimes there's this, like if you're don't work or, have a lot of free time, you can kind of get complacent or whatever. And then suddenly things get added on and you start getting more things done. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see about that. But I mean, it's true for me, but it really was just a coincidence that I only started doing music after my kids were born. It wasn't, it was actually because of them that I started taking guitar lessons, because I thought I took my first son to one of these, like, in hindsight, super goofy and probably not useful, like kid movement / classes where you go and some lady plays guitar and like all these toddlers run around in a circle. Uh-huh. I mean, it was just like something I think for the mothers to do. Yeah. And you think that your kid is getting some artistic benefit out of it, but I'm not really sure if that's true. You know what I mean? But this lady had an acoustic guitar and she would sing and like make the kids run around or whatever. They were really little. And so that's where I got the idea. I was like, well, maybe if I got an acoustic guitar and started playing that, I'll be this like really great mom, and the kids are going to think I'm, really wonderful because I'll sing them songs. Like that's why I took my first guitar class. And then I got this guitar and I took like a group class through the city where I live, like a group folk class. And, anytime I tried playing the guitar, my kids were totally irritated by that. And like, they didn't care at all. And they were really little. And like, A, I wasn't any good. And B, they probably thought the guitar, I was just something that was taking my attention away from them. Mm. It didn't work. But then I just kept taking it because I kind of enjoyed it. And so that was the sort of odd thing about it for me, is it wasn't, that's really why it happened. It didn't happen because I thought, wow, I'm really going to give this a try now. I've always wanted to be in a band like all my friends or stuff. It didn't happen like that at all. And then so it was kind of like I was just doing it as a hobby, as just like a thing to do. And then, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I should learn a song that I like instead of these like textbook kind of songs that they teach you.
Greensleeves.
Yeah, or the joys of love, or the class I took was really pretty good in hindsight. This strange group folk class I took, but yeah. And then I don't know. And then I was dating. Then I had gotten divorced, and then I was like dating some guy who had been in bands. And so when I was with him, we would be around musicians, right? And it just coincidentally happened to be when I was taking those classes. And so then I was just kind of in that milieu again all of a sudden for some reason. Like after a long time of not hanging around really with musicians, I was suddenly hanging around them again while I was taking guitar. And so then I kind of decided to tried writing a song, and then that's sort of how it started.
One of the things I kind of wanted to, I don't know, but pick apart, but like what we were talking about earlier in terms of needing right and wrong answers and things. I think for me at least, a lot of that was like a fear of vulnerability. Especially when I was in a band in college, all my lyrics were wrapped up in levels and levels of obscurity and irony. Because if I would write something that was honest, then what if it was cheesy? Or what if it revealed something about me that was just like basic and dumb?
Right.
And there was a constant anxiety and fear of that. So a lot of that stuff got wrapped up in that. And then even when I started writing comedy, it was a lot of nonsense wrapped up in like absurdity. Because if I just say, if there's just a joke, it's a sketch, and there's like one basic premise for the sketch, and it's people don't like it, then I did something bad. I'm wrong.
Right.
Right. It's that kind of like the teacher putting an F on my.
Right.
Yeah. And there's such like a primal basic fear of that for me. So like, what was it that changed? I can take a guess in terms of like, I mean, I wonder about like if you have kids and don't you get exhausted at some point? I know that like when I started to become more vulnerable and honest about my own emotional life, there was just an exhaustion that had set in at some point too, where I'm just like, it's too difficult to just keep up these walls. Let's just be real about who I am, and if I suck if I'm existentially shitty, then that's just the way it is, I guess. Or I can just work on it. I don't know.
Right. I don't, it's weird because my lyrics are so highly personal.
Yeah.
And they're really, I know.
There was one that like struck me. I was listening to it the other day. I forget the exact lyric, but something about like the person is saying to you that they wish they had fucked you when you were 21 or something like that. I'm just like, holy, like that's what I was thinking of when I was thinking about that vulnerability, where I'm like, that's a lot different than like someone who was like, well, I need this to be binary, yes or no.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. And that song is hard that song is hard for me because that really did happen and it wasn't that long ago. And so it's almost like, and it's part of what's hard for me is just the fact that I actually lived through that, like that I put myself in that situation and lived through that and tolerated it and actually liked the person. And that's the worst part of it to me. I mean, I remember when I got the idea to make a song out of it, I was excited because I thought at the time, I was like, this is such an insane thing that this person said that it gave me good material. So I had this kind of like, I was outside of my own personal feelings about it. I was being a little bit more like objective about the fact that it was just such a crazy thing that anybody could say to anybody else,
Yeah.
So, it's a good line or whatever, but the fact is that the sad part is that not just, the biggest part of that, and I try to convey it in the song, is that I continue to like that person. And that's the part that I think is like I didn't want to write a song that was just like, oh, this person was a dick, poor me. Like, so I included that part of it, but to me, the sort of like punchline of that is more that I actually liked him. Yeah. And so that's hard for me to deal with because that's kind of sad. But luckily, luckily it is in the past. Mm-hmm. So, that's cool, but that it's in the past. But,
so yeah, so
I
what
don't
changed?
know how, I don't know what, I guess probably all that I feel like happened was, so I was taking those classes. Then I thought maybe I'll try to write a song. And then I thought, what could I possibly write a song about? And the only thing, I mean, one of my songs is written about somebody completely different. Like that's not about me, where I'm writing from the perspective of this guy who like murdered his girlfriend. And but all my other songs are about me and from my perspective. And like, you know, maybe that's self-centered of me, or maybe I'll whatever, I don't know. Maybe I'll write about other things later. But that was what I thought of. Like when I tried to write a song, the first song I wrote, I was just thinking about what was on my mind at the time, or something that I was thinking about, that I was struggling with and grappling with internally about my own emotional state. Like, why is this thing happening to me again? Like, why am I going through this thing again and again? Which is something that's on my mind a lot, because a lot of my songs kind of allude to that. And so then I just wrote words about what was going on in my life, and then made them into a song.
But what made it?
So I don't know. And I guess
what was it about you that was like? Because if you had continued on the path that you were on when you were a kid, right? And I want to talk a little bit more about your childhood then. But this idea of like being that kind of having a lot of like boundaries and layers up to protect yourself in some way. And because that's what that was mine, right? I don't want to project myself on you, but like I think a lot of like the being a logic kid or whatever you want to call it was about needing to cling to the certainty of right and wrong, because once you step into the emotional space, you abandon right and wrong, and there's no solid handholds for you. And it took me, therapy and a lot of other things in my life, being humbled by existence, to finally start being emotional and vulnerable later in life. I'm curious, what happened between your childhood and you starting to write songs? Because I wonder what would happen. I mean, this is a counterfactual. We don't know. But what if you had started writing songs, 20 years ago?
Right.
Would they have been that, what if like when you were in the DC punk scene of the early 80s, it was mostly, I mean, I listen to a lot of Discord.
Right.
I listen to Minor Threat, and I listen to a lot of that music. It's angry. It's vulnerable in one dimension, which is mostly anger, but not really much else. Like, what happened if you had been writing songs then? Like, what was the big change?
I mean, maybe that's why I didn't want. That could have been part of why. I'm not sure. I've never really thought about this part of it, about what you're asking about. I've always thought about like that straight mechanical thing I told you, which is like why I picked up a guitar, which really is different, which is not exactly what you're asking about, because so it's like I had the guitar and then I felt like I wanted to. So maybe my answer to you, because I never really thought about it, is just that for whatever reason at that time, so I was taking guitar lessons for a different reason. And then I could have just quit. Like I could have just learned some cover songs, or like realized that my kids didn't care and then stopped, because I really took it for them and they didn't care. So I could have just abandoned it at that time, but then I didn't. So I don't know, maybe because I was divorced and feeling kind of vulnerable in a different way, and then suddenly had this potential outlet in front of me, that I had something, and then maybe I just felt like I had something that I wanted to get off my chest, kind of like, because that first song I wrote was the Max on the Black Sea song that was all about like guys and breaking up and what this guy said to me like a long time ago. I mean, that the first song I wrote, the plot of it took place many years before, but it was this sort of thing where I kept thinking like, this keeps happening in my life. So it was very much about like why I can't make relationships work, and all these things. So maybe it's because of after all the perspective. I mean, I got divorced. My kids were really little, like 1 and 2 or smaller than that, which is a pretty nutty time to be a single parent, when your kids are that little. So I definitely was really thinking about why can't, why am I not making these relationships work? Or why do I make these bad choices that aren't good for me? And so maybe it just was then a coincidence with the guitar timing. And then I felt like I had things on my mind that I could, I don't know. It's interesting because I can tell you that I remember the first time I played that song somewhere, there was like a couple sitting there in this bar. And as I was playing the song, I could see them talking and I was thinking to myself, I bet they're wondering why I'm standing here doing this. Like they're probably saying, wow, this girl's really awful. I wish she would stop. Like while I was performing the song, I was imagining what those people were saying about me and thinking that they thought I was bad. So, getting back to the other thing about wanting to do a good job or thinking that I need a good grade on this or whatever, that is definitely the first thing that was on my mind.
Yeah.
And that I don't know. I mean, maybe there's just, I guess on the other hand too, when I think about like, one thing that I think about too as a parent is I feel like something I've observed with myself and I think with other people, I haven't talked to a lot of parents about this, but I feel like parents often try to do a better job with their kids than they think their parents did with them. Mm-hmm. So like my mom made this big point of teaching me and my sister how to like pay bills and fill out like health insurance forms and write checks and like and balance bank statements when we were really young, because her mother didn't know how to do that when my grandfather passed away. His wife didn't know how to do anything. So my mom decided like, you shouldn't be like that. And nobody taught me this. So I'm going to teach you this. Right. So she tried to give us that as like a thing that make it better than she had been raised and that her own mother had been raised. Right. So she was trying to make us better like that. But but I feel like what I could have been, what I might have been lacking when I was a child is just like a sense that anything I did was good, or that, it's worth it to try all sorts of things. And it's okay if you don't do a good job at them, or go try to be in a play or, try to do something creative and it's okay. To me, I feel like the message was just like, get good grades and that's all that really matters. And so there could be something about my just, the sort of cathartic experience that I'm getting from just my songs are so personal, and the personal sort of self-expression that maybe I'm finally getting some kind of validation for my own feelings and my own like emotional life by doing this. And it's not like I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, when these 3 people at my show clap, it's okay that I'm sad or whatever. But I mean, just by virtue of writing the songs about these personal things, perhaps that's part of why I do it, or part of why why I value it, because it just actually feels good to be doing it. Yeah. I mean, obviously I didn't consciously think of this, like, okay, now I'm going to write songs about these things, like those are just what I choose to write songs about. That's just what happens. It's not like I think that I'm doing it in order to give myself some kind of like healing, but but I think that could be why that stuff is important to me, and why I end up writing about those things. Because I think a lot of my life, a lot of those parts of me, I subdued or I didn't allow to have come out, or I wasn't, and therefore also wasn't around people where I felt comfortable being vulnerable.
Yes.
Right. And so then it is kind of an odd thing that I'm now sing these songs that are so vulnerable in front, like on a record, I mean, it was one thing when I would perform them. And it's true that when I finally was putting the record out, I was like, oh, wow, this is going to actually be a song that like all these people are going to hear. That's kind of, a couple of them. For the most part, it's fine. But like that 21 song is kind of like, wow, that's a little intense, that's just like out there in the public record. But
there is a thing when I make something, whatever it is, a video, a show, a podcast, whatever it is, where I think I was like being particularly vulnerable or something, like there's something there that I'm seeking approval from an audience. When it's actually released, there's something changes in my body, and I don't know what it is, but I'm suddenly understanding the thing I made totally from the point of view of an audience, but more from a point of view of an audience. And there's something that like then I start to feel super vulnerable and super like it just changes. Like I can't write that song, but like something where I'm like honest about my emotions, and I'm be fine with it. And then the minute that it's released in some way, I like curl up emotionally, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's something here about something that's resonating with me about this idea of like our parents stressed in so many ways logic over empathy. It's not that I don't know about you, I can't, but like I feel like I'm a fairly empathetic person, but because that stuff wasn't stressed at all, that the logic stuff takes over. And now as an adult, I'm trying to learn how to better how to better live in empathy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the same for you.
I mean, we were sort of like, I mean, my parents might have been emphasizing school and stuff like that, but we were also largely very unsupervised from a pretty young age. So that's a sort of different problem also that I think of when I think about my kids too, or when I think about like what I was doing when I was 13. I mean, that's part of why I was going to shows, you know, like when I was 13, I was going to shows. So my kids are teenagers now, and I often look at them and think like, you know, just comparing what they're doing to what I did, because I had no hobbies. My hobby was like going to shows, which is a fine hobby. I mean, you could do worse things, but still, I wasn't really doing anything for myself. Like, it wasn't like I was in a band, or it wasn't like I was taking acting classes or on a sports team or doing anything, you know, extracurricular, right? Or whatever. Like, I was just hanging out. And I mean, I even went on tour with Minor Threat and the Necros and DC's Youth Brigade when I was 14. Like throughout the Midwest, and we went into Canada. My mom let me do that. And that's kind of crazy, right? Like I was, you know, I mean, she let me do that because it was like Ian, you know, because Ian was super responsible and straight edge and all that stuff. And Ian had already, once I had like run away from home when I first moved to DC and I was 14, and Ian was pretty much the one who got me to go home and had like brought me home to like found me and then brought me home to my mom and like got me to go home again. So he'd already established himself in my mom's eyes as like this like very responsible, almost like father figure to me. But still, I still was only 14. It's kind of crazy, right? So I was like hanging out and doing all this stuff and going to shows and going out to bars and things when I was that age for a while. So that's kind of a sidebar that now I don't remember why I brought it up, but but so empathy. So I think, I mean, I don't know about empathy for me so much is like, I guess I feel like my current issue that I am grappling with is that kind of pull between the professional, quote, responsible adult stuff versus being to be doing music. 'Cause here I am doing it now at a time when most people are, I mean, I don't know, like I had to, in my mind, kind of come to terms with doing this where there's still this part of me that thinks of it as not like, you know, that's struggling with that thing that we're talking about, you know? So, but it's just, but this is the fact of the matter is that it's been the most like enriching and amazing thing that I've ever done, right? So like I might have studied Russian and done all these things that on paper are difficult or that somebody might think are impressive, right? But writing music and playing shows and making a record and playing with other people, because when I started writing, I've written all my songs alone and I play alone a lot, right? So it's not like I've ever really been in a proper band. So anytime people play with me, I've never had like a constant band and I've never written songs with a band. So I don't really understand that dynamic yet, but even just playing with different people and learning to, you know, bring other instruments in and listen to other instruments, right? Because I was used to playing alone first before I played with other instruments. So all of that has been like so much more difficult than all the other things that I did before in the traditional world. Like, it's been so much more difficult and so much more enriching and so much more gratifying, even though it's sort of also, it's just like hard. And I mean, it honestly also makes me sad for our culture. And I mean, I know I should have learned this when I was a teenager and saw this happening to my friends, sort of how I think we don't value creative people in the sense that you can't, why can't somebody have like people get, consume music and consume music for free without paying for it, essentially. So it's like everyone's getting all this music for free. And then, you play you play a show and you get like $5 or whatever. Like, so many artists put so much work and effort into what they're doing. And it's clearly a thing that's valued in society because everyone wants music, and music is such an important part of people's lives. And yet so many amazing musicians get like nothing for it. So I think that's kind of a sad thing, and maybe
Yeah.
I haven't really paid a lot of attention to it. And I'm not trying to say that it's sad for me. I'm not feeling sorry for myself about not making, that's not at all what I mean. I just mean in general, I think it's true with probably other art forms as well, that it's not something that's monetarily, it's just hard to make money doing it. And
Well, we're still living out.
sad.
We're still living out the remnants of Enlightenment thinking, where like again, I think as a society we are struggling, or as not even just like American society, but I think globally in some way, we are struggling with this kind of like Western Enlightenment thought that prized logic in some way over everything else, and our own personal pathways mirror that in some way. Where like you and I both struggled with trying to get away from that kind of binary Enlightenment thinking of stickers and candy for doing well in school to a less sure-footed kind of existential area, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
But I think, well, I mean, one of the things I'm curious about, and maybe we can just go back to the very beginning, because you were born in Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
How did your parents end up here? I'll throw a lot of questions out and we can just kind of like tackle them in whatever order you feel like it. But like, what were your parents like? How did they end up in Los Angeles? And then we can talk about your move to DC.
Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting. I mentioned my grandmother used to live near here. She was actually from Russia. So my mom's parents were both from Russia. And they left. They both were from Siberia, and then left during the Russian Civil War, and lived first in China, in Harbin, China. Like, there were a lot of Russian emigres refugees from the Civil War after the Russian Revolution. So they lived there for like a year, and then went to Japan and took a boat to Vancouver.
Attacking, or what was it? I'm struggling in my brain.
Well, so like
Mensheviks, is that
so I mean, it was like in the 1920s that the Russian Civil War was like after the Bolsheviks took over and toppled the Tsarist regime, right? So like my grandparents met, I think around in the early 1920s, and then fled Russia, and then lived in China, and then went to Japan and took a boat to the West Coast. So like they went to Vancouver and then entered the U.S. from there. So they lived here eventually. And so my mom was born here. So my mom was born in LA and went to Hollywood High, and but spoke Russian as her first language. My mom learned Russian at home, and there's a Russian church that's still here that's where was the focus of their whole life, was this Russian church and the Russian community. But my grandfather, who I never met, was definitely changed his name to an American name immediately, and supposedly learned English really well, and was really hard worker, and that classic emigre, came here with nothing kind of story, and then did well. And as a salesman or something. It wasn't like he was I don't know what he did well, but I mean, I think that there's that definite hard work ethic coming from them too, and then my dad my dad's family was from Texas, and a lot of his relatives and stuff stayed there, and he was one of the only ones who left, I guess. And he definitely was Mr. like capitalist, and worked at like Litton Industries and I don't know. I don't really know what he did. He was like an engineer and definitely like big businessman type who only, who cared about material things. And I mean, even though we had a jukebox in our house and, like everybody liked music. It's not like that, but there was definitely no religion in my upbringing at all. And just kind of, that's what I can say about that.
How did the capitalist engineer meet? I don't know if your mom.
I think my mom was like a secretary. No, she wasn't. No, they were definitely anti-communist. They hated they all hated all the Russian emigres hated the Soviet Union and stuff like that. So she was like a secretary at his company. That's how they met.
So like Mad Men.
And my mom wanted to get away from the Russian thing too. Like she liked my dad because she was wanted to sort of like be different than her parents. And, she married like a very American guy, like a Texan man.
Yeah. I mean, that's the, version of America from 1950 to like 1989, let's say.
Yeah, that is definitely true. He was like that. So yeah. But then, my parents got divorced when I was probably like 7 or 8. And my mom went to law school, which I give her, like in the 70s. I guess it was in the 70s. Yeah. And then she wanted to get out of LA for some reason. Like I think she wanted something, what she thought was sort of more, like less associated with entertainment maybe, and kind of just like a change of scenery. And so she wanted to work for the government. I mean, she became a lawyer and like wanted to move to DC so she could be involved with government, which is kind of interesting. So that's why we went there. Was because she wanted to kind of like not be here anymore and work for work in the government.
I mean, that's kind of like a big change. Both your parents getting divorced and then you move across the country to a completely different. I was going to say climate. Sure, I don't literally just mean like weather. I mean like just DC is. I've only been here a couple years. I'm from the East Coast.
Right.
And I've only been here a couple years, but this coast, it just feels so alien to me.
Right.
Kind of like just everything, existentially, emotionally, just like the whole thing is, feels strange. So I assume
it's true.
You going the other way would feel
but it's funny you mentioned the weather too, because I remember like I had to buy a coat, I think for like the first time, when I moved to DC.
Yeah.
Right from here. I definitely did not want to go, but then, when we moved, my sister's 2 years older than I am, and she was the one who got me kind of into punk rock stuff. Like she started going to shows in LA, and then I kind of started going with her to some shows. So I was like, we were both like these like punk girls. No, when I was like 13.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you meant in LA.
In LA, I was still 13. No, we didn't. My parents got divorced, and then we moved. We stayed here for a while. We didn't move. We didn't move immediately.
I see.
We stayed here for a while and then moved. But
I mean, what's the like? Is that like Black Flag and things like that?
Yeah, Circle Jerks.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, with the Go-Go's, I don't know. I probably didn't go to that many shows because I was only like quote punk rock for a little while. But I did go to see Devo at the Santa Monica Civic Center. And I remember this really well because this was when I still hadn't cut my hair off. Like I had like long, quote normal. I had like long hair, quote or whatever. And I was wearing this like white zippered jumpsuit. So I thought I was like really cool, kind of like new wave, and these hot pink shoes. Like I remember really clearly what I was wearing. And this kid outside who was like a punk called me a poser. And it really made me mad. Like, cause I thought, I remember thinking like I was trying pretty hard to be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have only been 12 when I went to that. Maybe I was 13. I was pretty young, but I was all dressed up. Like I kind of grew up early. You could say that. But he called me a poser. And I remember thinking like, that, what does that mean? And then pretty soon after is when I was like, cut my hair off and like sort of got more punk or something. as if I was trying to prove something to that kid who I never saw again.
That's
I don't
so
know.
weird.
It just stuck in my mind because it was kind of obnoxious too. I mean, he just
100%.
like said something nasty to me for no reason, you know?
Yeah.
But whatever. But so we went to some shows, and then when we moved to DC, the scene was so small there. We just like met everybody instantly. Like we just went to like the record store in town, and then like within one day, like met people and then made friends with people. So even though I didn't want to move there, and I ran away from home pretty soon after I moved there. We still kind of fell in with people right away and like made friends that were nice. And it was like definitely a friendly group of people, you know? So in hindsight, it was a pretty nice place to move. If you were going to like have to, you know, if you were going to pick a town, you know, to move into, because it was a small enough scene that, you know, you could just meet everybody right away and like instantly have some friends and like places to hang out and everything.
Community. I mean, that's
right,
the
well,
thing.
There you go. Yeah.
I growing up, you know, I had friends. We went to temple. I wasn't religious really. I was going through the motions, I guess, but I went to temple and stuff like that. But like when I finally was part of the music scene in college in Pittsburgh, that was the first time that I felt any kind of real community with people. Because I'm like, oh, I'm kind of like, I like people at school, but I don't feel like I fit in.
Right.
I like people at temple, but I don't feel like I fit in.
Right.
I don't feel like I fit in with my family. This is the first time that I actually felt like I had some kind of real connections with other people. I'm assuming that it's the same kind of thing for you.
Yes. And in fact, so when I started, so I wrote a few songs when I first got that guitar and was dating that guy. And then I stopped for some reason. And then when I started writing them again, like when I started playing again, like a couple years ago, I'm friends with Christina Martinez, you know, who sings in Boss Hog. Like she and I went to high school together. So, you know, I was friends with her when she met John Spencer and like when they got together when they were teenagers. Right. And like, but anyway, I'll text her sometimes, you know, with like questions about stuff that I'm doing now or whatever. And so when I started playing again, she really wanted me to have a band name and she encouraged me to not use my name, but to have a band name for some reasons or whatever. And so for a while I was really trying hard to come up with a band name. And I was once listening to like a science show on the radio, and there was a guy was talking about something about archaeology, and he used a term called marker bed, which there's different terms for that same thing. Like if you look it up, there's other, just like, it's like a layer in the strata when you go back and you're looking at something that might have happened a long time ago. I guess a marker bed is where you see the same pattern in something, and you might see it like in different locations around the world or whatever, like not right in one spot, but like a certain layer of sediment that is recognizable and that can indicate to people now looking back that the same thing happened, you know, that a similar thing happened in these different places. Is called a marker bed. And so all of a sudden I had that idea about as a band name, because I feel like that's what music was like for me. Because I think when anybody, like I feel like the thing that ties me to so many people is that common thing of the music scene in some way. You know, whether it's playing music or just even being someone, even before I was playing, it was like the fact that I liked certain kinds of bands or went to certain kinds of shows, you know, means something to me. And like when I try to like go on dating, like when I try to date people, you know, like if they say their favorite band is like U2, like on a dating profile, like I'm like, I don't even think I can meet someone like that. Which I realize is very judgmental and I probably shouldn't be that way, right? But there is something about having that in your background, like in part of how you grew up or whatever it says about you, that I feel like it ties everybody together. And it's something that like, you know, 100 years from now or 500 years from now, you know, people could look back at like the whole kind of scene, probably starting with like punk rock and, you know, even through a few decades, and tie people together in that way, right? Like these people were all connected in a certain way. So anyway, I didn't keep the band name, but I like the concept of it, because I really think it's true.
What made you run away? Was this like, how soon after moving to DC?
It was very soon after. And again, it's weird because it feels sort of like a passive act. It was kind of a passive act, almost like I went out to see the Cramps at the original 930 Club, and I went with Ian and probably but I'd really only been there a little while, so it's not like people, and there were no cell phones or like email then, so it's not like I don't know how I guess whatever. We met I'm sure I went down there with those people to the show, and it was on a weeknight, and my mom let me go, and then I was like late getting home, so I chose to spend the night at the Mackay house. Like I didn't go home, and I spent the night at the Mackay house, and then I was like supposed to go to this new school that I'd gotten into because my mom moved me out there like. It was like April of my 9th grade. So it was like this really awkward time. And I had been in a private school. But I had been like not going to school, and I had all these bad grades. And so I was in this weird Catholic school that I'd literally gone to for one day. And then the next day I was kind of late for school. And then I just didn't feel like facing my mom. So I just didn't go home. Like I went somewhere else and like found some people I knew and just kept hanging out and like avoiding my real life. So it wasn't like I got all mad one day and like packed a bag and like stormed out of the house. I just kind of like didn't go back because I don't think I wanted to face what I was supposed to be doing. And I was just hanging out with these people. It was very kind of strange. And then I was at this bar / club one night, and John Stabb, who was the singer for the GIs, he passed away not long ago of cancer. He was like working at this place, and he came up to me and he's like, "Hey Anna, what's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, not much." He's like, "People are kind of worried about wondering what's going on with you." And like, we really I think I'd moved to DC in April of 81. And this was maybe a month after I moved there, or maybe 6 weeks. I hadn't been there very long, but long enough for people to notice that I was doing something dumb. Right. So he's like, "Well, Ian's working up the street at the theater." Ian worked at this movie theater. He's like, he wants to talk to you. And I was like, I knew what Ian would want to talk to me about. I immediately knew he's going to try to convince me to go home. And I didn't want to go home. Right. And I was like, so I went up to talk to him anyway, because maybe I guess there was a part of me that was tired of not eating ketchup or what. I don't know what I was doing. And so I went up to talk to him, and this is, it really does kind of blow my mind when I think about it. Cause I guess he was probably 17 or something. He's like a kid, that's pretty young. And he totally convinced me to come home with him, to go stay with him at his parents' house instead of wherever I was staying, in a very suave way. He didn't, scold me. He didn't tell me I was being bad. He was really nuanced about his approach and how to try to kind of get me to do what he wanted, what he wanted was a good thing, right? He was trying to get me home eventually. So he had me, I went and stayed at Beecher Street he's like, "Just come and stay with us as long as you want. You don't need to go to I'll tell your mom you're okay, but you don't need to go home until you want to." So I did, but that was pretty amazing when I think about it. At that age to have that kind, he's got amazing kind of leadership, natural leadership skills. You know, that's what I think when I think about that. The way he was able to kind of cajole me to do that. And then, and that's also when I'm with my record, I came up with this record label name probably a year ago or something. Ian's been digitizing or reading. His mom kept all these journals, and he is I guess they're searchable somehow. I think he scanned them in a way that they're searchable. And I was visiting him, and he's like, "Let's look and see what my mom wrote about you." And I was like, "Oh no, I don't want to know." And he searched, Anna. And the first thing that came up with, she's like, the phone rang, and it was, Vera, the mother of Anna, the runaway girl. She asked about a psychologist. So my mom, so anyway, Ginger Mackay referred to me as Anna, the runaway girl, which I think is pretty awful. It kind of makes me sad. It's sort of like my song 21. I'm like that's kind of, I was pretty young to be not living at home for a whole week, you know? So I'm happy that everything turned out okay. But
how'd your mom react? I mean, she called Ian's mom to find a psychologist, but
Yeah, my mom was sort of oddly calm about the whole thing. I don't know. It's just kind of odd.
well, what is she like as a person?
She's a great, I think she was probably an overwhelmed single mother at the time. And, I feel like a lot of people I talk to, maybe in LA too, that were my age, that grew up here, had a similarly unsupervised upbringing where it was like we're all just running around doing whatever. But I don't know.
I think that was a general trend up through, because my own childhood was kind of like that up through, and I grew up in the 80s. And I think if you were born, let's say late 80s into the 90s, I think that's when people started to stop just letting you, like I could just go after school, I could go play with my friends outside anywhere, really, as long as I told my parents where I was going, but I could just go anywhere,
right,
relatively in the neighborhood. And I think the like generation after me, I think that's where people started to like really like helicopter parents got to be a phrase, right?
And I mean, I think that I'm certainly grateful in a way that my mom like let us go out at night. I was like going out to bars when I was really young, but that was also, I think, because they weren't carding. I don't really, either they didn't card girls or it's because I know I looked older, but I didn't look that old. But I definitely looked older than my age, but I was never carded. So I don't understand if that was just a thing of the time when it didn't matter as much that bars wouldn't, like now, I just don't think that happens now. And also, DC was still the 930 Club is an all ages venue. They made a point of being an all ages venue then, and they still are, which is not that common, so we were able to go to shows because some of those clubs were all ages on purpose, but then I was also just going out to places that were not all ages, but I was still able to go out. That's definitely like an extreme, let your like 14-year-old daughter go to, out at night to bars. That seems kind of crazy, but I don't know. It makes me upset that there's so many places now that are 21 and up. Like I think Zebulon, I think the show tomorrow night is 21 and up,
Yeah.
It seems sort of criminal to like bar to keep children, to keep teenagers from seeing bands, but I guess probably they can get into shows that they want to get into, but I
was always furious about, and I grew up in the suburbs in Pennsylvania, so it's a little different. But like it seems like there was a suburban mindset that punished kids that wanted to do anything fun. And they didn't punish you if you sat in your basement and got high, but they did punish you if you went skating outside, or they did punish you if you ran around with your friends outside.
Interesting.
And were loud. And that I think there's like a continuum of that where it's like where punk shows that are 21 and up like are some kind of continuum of like punishing kids for wanting to do something fun that isn't smoking pot or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah. My mom did in LA when she was pretty young. I think she would go to jazz clubs. So she might herself have kind of thought, she also really liked Ian. And that had a lot to do with it, was the fact that the first, that Ian brought me home and Ian was straight edge meant that because he was around a lot of the time when I was out, even though I was drinking, like I was still around him a lot. So I think that just his presence in our lives in DC made her more trusting of what I was doing, because he was like, the father of that scene or something. So I think that made her a little more trusting of all that kind of stuff,
is that what that was like? I only have access to the early 80s punk scene through, reading about it, or that's it, really.
Yeah.
Listening to the music.
It wasn't just him, obviously, and there was all these, there were other people, but because I was friends with him, and then my sister was like dating him, forever. So, but because of that initial experience with him, he's been like a fixture in my life, forever, but he definitely is like sort of leader type. But I mean, I was doing other stuff too, obviously. Like I was going to shows without him and going to bars and doing things that were not under his, like things that he was not involved with or whatever. But,
I mean, after you run away or you slide into running away.
Right.
What you get home, what does your mom say? What's your relationship like with her after that? Does it change at all?
Not really. Not really. No.
She's still kind of just overwhelmed?
I guess so. And I'd try not to, I don't want to make her feel bad about it now because I sort of wonder about that, but then I'm like, all right, whatever. I ended up finding some weird high school to go to that was really small. And so then I just like finished that's probably also why I didn't take physics, because I went to some really strange small high school that like barely had strange classes. But anyway, so.
What do you mean by strange?
Well, I mean, like there was no PE and I'm pretty sure there was no art. I mean, it was
like a Montessori school?
No, it just was odd. It was very little, and it had like a number of Christina Martinez went there, and Brendan Canty went there a little bit, and like it just was this very, very small school. Like it was essentially after I stopped because I was in public school and I just didn't go. So even after I ran away, I came home, and then in 10th grade, I just didn't go to school at all. So I was definitely like rebelling in some quiet way. Like I just stopped going and I would sit at home all day.
That's a major way. Again, for someone who, as maybe we've established, and maybe that's just me projecting a lot of myself on you, but like a lot of your, I don't know about personality, but like your existential skeleton was formed by like doing well in school or the need to do well in school. And then even when I was rebelling against my parents, I still did well in school and I still went to school and was scared about not doing well in school.
Right. I think that I'm just guessing in hindsight, this was all because I didn't want to move to, like moving to DC during when I was, during my 9th grade year. Like I probably didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm guessing that's where this all stemmed from, because that's pretty much when that all happened. And then as soon as I found that other school, and then everything was fine. And I got a job at a record store, which was really great. So that was another big part of my community feeling and that structure outside, because I started working at that store during high school, and then worked there like full time for like I took I guess what's called now a gap year, but like I didn't go to college right away, and I just like worked at the record store, and then I realized that I wanted maybe to do something more, so that's why I went to college, but the record store was definitely like a lot of positive influence, and a lot of people in the scene, even if I'm calling myself a person in the scene, even though I wasn't a musician, but like they hired a lot. This one particular chain, like hired a lot of ragtag teenagers, which is pretty awesome when you think about it. Like you could get a job and listen to music all day and hang out with your friends, but have like responsibility but be in a music setting. It's pretty cool.
I mean, it's not as if you started making music out of that it came out of nowhere, right? There are seeds, and I think like emotional seeds, especially in like finding something in this music community in DC that probably like sat there dormant in your life.
Yes. That's definitely true. And I have like a lyric that has like this unwritten song that sort of refers to that. And then I sometimes realize when things influence me when I didn't know they did, And Steve Albini is a friend of mine also, and not long ago, like Shellac came to town, and then a bunch of people went out to breakfast the next day, and I was talking to him, and even though I had been in touch with him about stuff about my record or whatever, it wasn't like it's not like, I cover a Shellac song on my record, right? So like, he's on it's not like I'd forgotten about him completely, but while I was sitting there talking to him, it suddenly dawned on me that I think that Big Black actually, and Shellac had a major influence on me, even though my songs sound nothing like them. Like you would never think that, but what I think it is the lyrics, because Steve's lyrics there's a certain kind of like irony about them. I love like the Big Black lyrics. Like they're great. There's a lot of like great storytelling in his lyrics, and there's often like a twist, or there's some dark thing going on, or some reveal at the end, or something that makes you think. Like I get very sucked in by his lyrics and his storytelling, and just part of the way he is. And when I was sitting there, I was like, wow, I just realized this. Like I'm sure that that's been an influence on me. And like I didn't think like I can't wait to write songs like Big Black. Like I was not thinking that, but I'm sure that that's a major influence on my lyric writing. Because that is something that it's interesting, back to the whole perfectionist thing, because it's really odd, because it's really like when I think that a song is done, I will actually just consider it done, even though I'm sure it could probably be improved, like, because I think I'm afraid to improve it forever. Like I'm afraid to open that door, because then it will never get finished. Yeah. Right. But so I will like, there's something that happens where when I think a song is done, I just like, I'm like, all right, it's done. Even though certain things lyrically kind of irritate me, or I'll know there are certain things that I have in my lyrics that are like, that I know are actually kind of incorrect.
Yeah.
Or they're weird. Like I have like the you, the word you, like in certain songs, you is like multiple people. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like if this was a poem, it'd be confusing. Well, who's you? As I'm changing it around. But then I'm like, I can't keep fixing it, or I'll drive myself crazy. But I do think that there are things that I try, like that 21 song took me a long time to write, because I was trying to make it more nuanced than just like, this person was a jerk to me and I hate them. Like I didn't want to write a song just like that. And I also still kind of was friends with the guy when I was writing it. So I also somehow felt guilty, which is also really demented. But that was a song too, where I was trying to make it more like you'd still have to kind of think about it a little bit. Before, I don't know.
That seems like a nice place to end. How do you feel?
How do I feel?
Yeah.
I feel good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, oh bye, oh bye, oh bye, oh bye, oh bye, oh bye.